Hey guys, and welcome back to another Random Distractions home theater update. As I mentioned in the first home theater video, I was going to do a follow-up video in regards to the Pioneer receiver that I used to have, the VSX1131 versus the Anthem MRX 1140, and kind of comparing them and seeing what I thought. First of all, I want to talk about the Pioneer. That's the one that I've had since about 2016 or so. It's a 7.1 or 7.2 channel receiver. For the longest time, I had it as a 5.2 system. Just last year, 2020, I purchased the Dolby Atmos modules and added that onto it. And I wanted to kind of make it as fair as possible, so I decided to run MCACC, which is Pioneer's room correction software. All it is basically a microphone that hooks up to the front of the receiver, and you put it in your listening positions, and then it takes the measurements. And after it did that, it did kind of improve a little bit better the surround sound effects, it seemed like. So that was good. I watched 2 movie clips and then listening to a couple of songs to kind of get a good feel for what it sounded like. The clip that I used was from a movie that I own, Pacific Rim, on 4K Blu-ray. It was one of the first Blu-rays that I got, and I was really like blown away as to how good it looked and how amazing it sounded, especially back then. The clip that I saw was in Chapter 2, where the kaiju is coming up to the boat and it comes out, and then the robot comes out, and then they fight. What I noticed in regards to the Pioneer is that, you know, everything sounded clear, especially like at, you know, normal levels. When I turned it up to be more like the home theater experience, I started noticing that it was louder for sure, but it was also, best way to describe it is harsh, especially like higher frequency sounds were almost like hurting a little bit in my ears. The bass response was really good, I thought. I think it sounded great. But yeah, everything was, it could get louder, but it just sounded harsh. Some of the research that I've been doing lately kind of found out a little bit more about home theater. I still don't consider myself a pro or anything like that. But one of the things that I realized is that there's a big discrepancy between like what's advertised as far as wattage and power for a receiver than what is actually available from the receiver. So when I got this in 2016, I saw that it was rated at 140 watts per channel. Now that I know better, I know that that number is actually based on only 2 channels driven, and I'm trying to drive 7 channels from that receiver. So I'm definitely not getting 140 watts, and especially with these Pioneers that require a lot of power. I think what I was experiencing is the receiver not being able to provide enough power, and so it was starting to distort. That's what I think anyway. I don't know whether or not that is true or not. The other thing it mentioned, I think the receiver was it was 160 watts into 6 ohms, which I was like, at the time I was like, oh, that's awesome, because these are, you know, 6 ohm speakers. But when I looked, now that I know, I looked further into that claim, and it's actually 1 channel driven and only, I think, at 1000 kilohertz, so just that 1 frequency. So I'm not going to run 1 speaker at just 1 frequency. So yeah, so I'm learning a lot about how those things are being marketed to people, and people like me who don't know very much, you know, just kind of look at those numbers and don't realize what they actually mean. I listened to a couple of songs, and kind of the same thing as far as like the movies go, is that, yeah, it sounded really great. You know, I could hear the different instruments. It sounded very detailed. You know, I could hear them from my speakers, and that's kind of an important point when I get to the Anthem, but the same thing happened. So as I turned it up, it did get louder, but it also started feeling kind of like harsh. I couldn't necessarily hear the distortion, I guess, but something was wrong, and I could tell. There was one song that I played where it was sounding fine until the vocals came in, and his voice was just, oh my gosh, I had to turn it down immediately because it was just hurting too much. Like I said, at sort of like normal levels, it sounds fine, it sounds great, and like I said, the bass sounds really good. So then I went ahead and opened up the Arc Genesis box, so I'll show the unboxing video while I talk about this, but it comes with a little tripod which actually the quality of the tripod is really good. I was really surprised at how good that is. It came with the microphone, of course, which hooks up via USB to like a laptop or a computer, and of course the USB cable that came with it. I got that taken out. I went ahead and went to the Anthem website, which I had actually visited before to take a look at when I was doing the research for the receiver. I noticed that they had posted that there was a beta version of the ARC Genesis that would now support the new receivers. So I downloaded that, and actually when I turned on the Anthem receiver for the first time after I hooked it up, it actually had an update that it needed to do, and that took probably about 9-10 minutes or so. I think when I first ran it was back on the 12th, so February 12th it was when I first tried it. I checked the receiver settings. You know, you can set up your speakers to let it know, okay, yeah, I have fronts, I have backs, surrounds, and then I also added the Dolby Atmos modules, and you know that they were on the front, up-firing kind of speakers, because you can put that on there. And then I put that there was 2 subwoofers. Once I got that done, I tried to run the software, and for whatever reason, when it got to the subwoofers, there was no sound. Like there was nothing coming out of them, and I'm like, well, that's strange. I, you know, double checked my connections, making sure everything was hooked up, and they were, and it still wasn't working. So I powered it down and then turned it back on, because you know that's what they always say. If it doesn't work, turn it off and turn it back on and see if that fixes it. And it did. It actually ran the software, and I could hear the subs. But the unfortunate thing is I didn't realize, and it's not noted in the back panel, but when it was doing the left sub, it was actually coming out of the right, and vice versa. So I'm like, oh, darn it. But it was working, so I'm like, I'll just let it run and just to see. After I did that, I was like, and I tried listening to something, I was like, wow, this sounds really, really good. It's really amazing. I played that same clip from Pacific Rim, and it just sounded so good. I mean, like I was able to turn it up, and it was getting louder, but it was still clear, it still sounded good. I was really surprised at how much more my surround sound speakers were in the mix, and were you know, being able to do a lot more stuff. The only reason I think that's happening is because the receiver can actually, you know, provide that power to them, and more power to them, because I know one of the things that the 1140 for sure has is something that's called a toroidal, I think, power supply. And that just, from what I understand, is just the ability to be able to provide more electrical power to the amps so that they can, you know, provide that power to the speakers at higher volumes. I said, okay, let me go ahead and rerun it, so that way I can, you know, make sure that the speakers or the subs are actually being tested correctly. I tried to run it again, and then, you know, the subs were now showing the right way. But then when it got to the Dolby modules, nothing again, no sound. So I'm like, oh no, okay. So I did the same thing where I tried to turn it off, turn it back on, still wasn't doing it. I made sure that the settings were correct, and you know, everything looked right, and tried it again, and nothing. I decided just to leave it like that, and I would come back to it later and see if I could try to figure it out, because it was getting kind of late when I was trying it. But that was on the 12th, and then on the 20th, I decided to try it again. I had some time again to test it out. What I did before I started was just making sure that, you know, all the speakers were set right, and they were. Everything showed to be fine. Because one of the things that I noticed when I was doing it on the 12th was that sometimes I would have to reset the Dolby modules as what they were. So that was kind of weird. So I made sure that that was correct, and it was. And I went ahead and tried to run it, and everything worked. The subs were playing out of the right sides, and then the Dolby modules started making sounds as well, so that was good too. So I reran it, everything, and everything sounded great. I put in the movie again just to make sure, and it sounded really good, just as it before. And then when it got to music, oh my gosh, that was really the most amazing part about it. I really do love music. I don't play any musical instruments, but I love music. So listening to those songs, it just immediately put like a smile on my face, and I couldn't stop smiling because it sounded, my system has not sounded this good since I've gotten it. Because I thought it sounded great when I first got it, but putting this in here, it's like, I don't know, it's like I upgraded everything, not just the receiver. It sounded so good. And what's funny is I had recently read an article that talked about how Dolby Atmos is changing the way music sounds. And I can definitely see that. Because when I did the Arc Genesis, I ran one where it was, for movies, so it included all the speakers, but I also had a second measurement which allows you to do that, is that was only the front speakers and then the subs for a 2-channel kind of system. I did that, and when I switch between them and I play it in the 2-channel, yes, it sounds really great. You can definitely hear that stereo separation, and it sounds good. But when you have it under Dolby Atmos and you're listening to something that's a little bit more recent, because I did try playing like older songs and newer songs, and in the older songs you don't notice it as much. Everything's kind of being driven from the front. But in some more recent songs, the staging is just really amazing. I mean, you feel like you're in the middle of these musicians playing. You can still hear the vocals, of course, from the front, and then there's things happening on the left and right, but then there's also stuff happening in the back, which is really, really cool. I think I was listening to one song where you have your backup singers singing, and you have other like smaller instrument, and that's all you could hear from the back was these backup singers. You could hear them from the front, but they were also in the back, but you couldn't hear like the main person singing. So it was really separating those sounds, and it just sounded really amazing. Like I said, I couldn't stop smiling. It sounded so good. Do I think it's worth it? Yes, I really do. Because of the mix-up from when I picked it up, I got a better one than what I was expecting, which is awesome. So I can't say how the 740 and the 540 would be, but the 1140 is really blowing me away. It's really, really amazing. So obviously there is some downsides, kind of like I mentioned with those issues that I was having with the Arc Genesis. There's obviously some bugs, and as I said on the when I went to the website, they were showing that it was a beta version, so it's not the full version. And I think even somebody commented on my video that they were disappointed in that they were releasing these beta software and not the full baked version. And I did see something from another YouTuber called Youthman. He does home theater stuff as well, that he received a message from Anthem and he shared it with his community. And it talked about basically how, due to what's going on with the pandemic and all that stuff, they're actually not releasing their, I think it's the AVM90 preprocessor, which is one of the ones that was supposed to be coming out. It also kind of explains as to why the Arc Genesis software is still not, completely done. It's just because of all the stuff that's going on. And that makes sense, and I can kind of understand it. It still stinks because they announced it back in October and it was supposed to be released in March, although we're not even in March yet, and I was able to get it before that. So I guess that's just what happens if you're going through all this stuff where some things are ready but other things are not, and stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and give them a pass because from what I understand, and kind of the reason why I was leaning towards Anthem, is that they seem to really care about their products and giving them a long life, because I think the previous version of these receivers was like maybe 5 years ago. Don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% sure if that's right, but I think that's what I remember hearing. During that time, they've continuously made updates to them, and including given them the ability to use their newest version of their room correction software to help improve the way that they sound. So I think that as time goes on, they'll probably do the same things with these and help them to improve. So I'm looking forward to that. The other downside in regards to this, really that I can think of, I guess what it's kind of shown me as far as like, yes, my speakers sound great. I think that they're really good, but I'm kind of questioning my subs now. So yes, the bass is really well integrated. So kind of like how I mentioned in regards to the Pioneer, where it feels like I can hear stuff coming from the front for sure. And now with this, it's like I hear stuff from the front, I hear stuff from the back, and bass just kind of sounds like it's all over, which I know that that's the way that, you know, good bass is supposed to be, is like it's supposed to sound like it's coming from all over the place. So it does a really good job of doing that, but for whatever reason, I feel like it's lost some impact on certain things. So when I'm watching those movies of the Pacific Rim, and I even actually started watching like some other stuff like Ready Player One, that race scene, and then Aquaman, stuff like that. And there's some, yes, there was bass, but there was like the impact that I used to sometimes get from these subs when I had the Pioneer, and that might have been just because I had readjusted some of the way that some of the settings on it, and maybe that's what's making the difference. But yeah, it's like it's very well integrated, and I like that, but it's missing that impact. I read a little bit more this morning, a couple of different articles, and one of the things that I ran across was, you know, after you do room correction, most people actually do adjust the bass output, because what you have to remember is that what room correction is trying to do is trying to even out the levels for all of your speakers so that everything sounds the way it's supposed to. You're getting an equal amount from the speakers at whatever level or sound volume you have it set. And because of that, the ARC room correction, I know when I look at the settings that it did, it actually shows that the target level is 0. So when I was playing these, going to 20 was like right there. I mean, that was really loud. And I haven't tried going up beyond that, and I may try to do that to see how that sounds, but it's assuming that, you know, I'm going to turn it up to 0, and that's when everything's going to sound, you know, really big and impactful. That's basically the reason that I read from this article, is that, you know, a lot of people don't listen at those extreme volumes. So yeah, you're going to have to adjust the bass because it's thinking that you're going to have to go up to 0 in order to experience that level. So if you're playing them at lower volumes, then you need to turn it up in order to compensate. So I'm going to try that and see if that makes a difference. Hopefully it does. These subwoofers, they are rated for 300 watts RMS and then 600 watts max. And I think that they do pretty well. The one place that I notice sometimes where they struggle is because they're tuned to be their highest at 30 hertz, and then they drop off. So there's no, you know, lower frequencies, the ones that you can sometimes feel but you don't hear, kind of thing. I am kind of in the back of my head, I was like, oh, you know, should I get some other ones? I don't know if that'll happen, but yeah, so I would love to hear, you know, if anybody has any comments in regards to that or suggestions and tips. I actually got a suggestion from somebody that, you know, maybe in order to improve the Atmos experience with these speakers is to move them up to the wall, or, you know, even try to see if putting them on the ceiling. And with these Pioneer ones, they don't really have keyholes or anything like that, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do that. I'd have to try to find a way to hold them somehow if I do, but I'm going to see how it sounds with this new setup and see if that helps. I do enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to playing around with it a little bit more and seeing what else I can do with it. And maybe I'll do a follow-up one and see if I was able to improve the bass or not. So before I leave, the last thing I want to share with you guys is the Arc Genesis settings and kind of what it ended up doing. So I'm going to cut to that and then I'll be right back. Alright guys, so I'm here at my desk and I've pulled up the PDF because it actually, after you run the room correction, it allows you to review the information, and you can also print out a PDF that shows everything that was done to the receiver itself. So this is the front page. It shows that it's the 1140, and I ran it on Saturday the 20th. And here on this first page, we are looking at Profile 1, which this is going to be the movies version. This includes all of the speakers, so everything that I have. And here you can see in the red line is what it measured my front speaker to be at. And then the black line is what it actually is trying to get to, the target curve. And then the green is what it actually was able to do. And so you can see that it did a really great job of trying to even it out and stuff like that. It looks like my speakers sort of start to roll off just a little bit before 5 kilohertz. They start to go down some. And also the same for the center, but the center has a big boost over here somewhere between I don't know, 50 and about 200, maybe a little bit less than that. It has a big boost in there, and that may be why. The only thing I can think of is that it is inside the media cabinet, so that's possibly why that's doing that. But it did a really good job of trying to even that out. It looks like there's still a little bit of a boost around here, but it's definitely a lot less different than everything else, so that is good. Then we have the front right, also evened it out there. The surround left did a good job. It actually doesn't look too bad from where it was at, so that's kind of good. And then the surround right is over here. That one, it looks like it wasn't too bad either. The height speaker, that one looks like there's a lot of stuff going on there, and then there's like a big dip there in the little after 2K, and it was able to bring that up, but it still looks like there's something going on there, so that's kind of interesting. And looks like it also happened also with the right. What's surprising though is this over here. That's kind of a strange that they're showing that high of a response from these little Dolby Atmos speakers. So, and then we get into the subwoofers, and kind of like I mentioned, they do have they're tuned to 30 hertz, and so that's where that bump is. But it's also pretty low down here on these other ones, and then it kind of drops off pretty much right from the 30 hertz, drops down pretty steeply, and it looks like that's where the target curve needs to kind of be anyway, and it was able to adjust that really well. So there's the subwoofer number 2, and then kind of the same thing. It's also showing some issues over here, but it was able to adjust those. So then it goes into profile number 2, which is the music one, and that one only had the front left and right, and then the 2 subwoofers. They should technically be just about the same as what they were in the beginning when they did the other measurements. And that's what it looks like for sure, and it was able to adjust. And then the subwoofers should also be the same as it was before, but it only ran those 4 speakers and made adjustments for that. And then the last few pages, it actually kind of breaks down which profiles I picked, and you can actually name these profiles. So I named this one movies and the second one music, because thinking I would be able to switch to music when I wanted to listen to music, but it actually sounds better in the movies mode. So that's what that is there. And then the level settings is kind of what it did, and it's adding pretty much to all of them. There's no subtracting at all for any of them. Profile number 2 is also the same thing. It's adding more sound to them. And let's see here. I'm not exactly sure what all these other things are, like the target settings. I can kind of understand the crossover frequency. So I think when I originally ran it, it showed 80 Hertz as being the target for the crossover. And I know that they can go down lower, but there was a video that I watched that kind of convinced me about, like, you want your subwoofers to handle the low end bass because they do a much better job at it, even though, you know, you might have speakers that can go lower than, you know, 80 Hertz or whatever. I think the Pioneer front speakers are rated at 40 Hertz, but the reason that you would want to do that is that, you know, your subwoofers can do it well and they can do it consistently, so you don't have any issues on that. And then by freeing up the low bass notes, you give actually more power to your receiver because apparently bass notes are actually what uses the most power in an amp. So being able to free that up for your receiver will make the rest of the system sound really good. And so I decided to go from instead of 80, I went up to the 100 Hertz. And like I said, so far it sounded really great, so I'm happy with that. And yeah, so then it just kind of shows all of these, where the roll off is, correction frequency, send bass to sub, and like I said, I really don't know much about this. I would have to kind of dive more into it to see if there's anything that I need to do or need to change in regards to this. And it also shows the same thing for profile number 2, which was the 4 speakers instead of all of them. So yeah, that's what it is. And now I'll get back to the video. All right, so those are the settings that it had set up for my system and my room. And like I said, I really am very happy with the way that it's sounding. So I'm looking forward to enjoying some new movies that are coming out soon. We have HBO Max, so we're looking forward to, I think March 18th is the Justice League Zack Snyder cut. I might be hungry. So looking forward to that and hearing how that sounds. And then March 31st is Godzilla vs. Kong. I actually tried to play the Godzilla King of Monsters. I did a couple of different scenes, and again, with that bass is just kind of like, it's there, but it's missing that impact. So I'm really hoping that by adjusting some things, I'll be able to figure that out. And then I think in April, Mortal Kombat is coming out, so that'll be a cool one to do, to watch as well. So let me know if there's any other movies that I should try to check out. There is one other movie that I tried when I was testing to see how everything sounded, especially with the bass, was Godzilla #3. It's on Netflix. It's an animated video or an animated movie. One of the scenes in that movie really surprised me when I first watched it, was when Ghidorah shows up and destroys the ship that's above the planet. And there's some really low notes that play on that. So low, in fact, that it actually made one of my subs kind of make a rattling noise, and I'm like, oh, that's not good. And I thought maybe that after looking at some other videos, I'm like, oh no, that almost sounds like a bad driver, which is not good. After taking a look at it, I actually popped the grill off and played it again to try to listen to it, and it went away. And I'm like, well, that's strange. And so I put the grill back on and played it again, and it came back. And I'm like, well, what? And so I think the grill must be getting a little bit loose or something, and it's causing it to rattle at low frequencies. So I'll just have to make sure to take that off when I'm doing, you know, a really big thing. So, but it's still, you know, not quite there, I think. We'll see how that goes. All right, that's all I have for this video. I want to thank actually everybody that viewed my last video. I think it's like over 1,700 views now, so that's really amazing. Lots of likes, and actually got some dislikes as well. So, and you know that you're actually putting something out there that a lot of people are viewing when you start getting dislikes. So I'm in the dislike club now. Appreciate all the comments that I received. I tried to answer as many of them as I could, if there were some questions. A lot of them were actually just saying congrats, and you know, that's awesome, and things like that. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that. There was somebody that was actually looking for an answer comparing the 720 to the 740 without ARC room correction just to see if there was any difference between the older version and the new version. So hopefully, you know, if somebody sees that and can help them out, that'd be awesome. Since this is my first one, I have no idea. But if they sound anything like what the old ones did, these things are amazing. So I think that was really the only one that I couldn't provide an answer for. So would definitely appreciate a like, of course, on this video. Leave me any comments and questions and stuff like that. Would definitely appreciate a subscribe to the channel. I try to put out videos every day. A lot of them are, of course, games and stuff like that, or game experiences. Hopefully those are kind of entertaining between these other ones that are random different things. Definitely subscribe and hit that notification bell so you know when the next one drops. And until then, I hope you have a good one.